thing about you, Michael Itzkowitz, you are someone who I'm so excited to talk to. You have so much knowledge. You've done so much. You've been in so many places. You've seen so many things. You've heard so many things. You have been all over the world, right? I would imagine, right?
A lot of places, yeah.
Right, because of your time working with the federal government. And for those of you who don't know, Michael, he is the one who engineered, and tell me if I'm wrong here. You engineered the College Scorecard. Like this is you essentially birthed that.
I was a huge part of it. So I actually started working on this project in 2013. And the president, or 2012, the president announced it in 2013. So yes, I was the inaugural director to help lift this up, and we provided more information that's ever been provided on higher education. Specifically, over 5,000 institutions, and we have 2,000 data points on each and every one of them. So I am fortunate and honored to have been able to lose much of my hair and have it turn more gray working in the federal government until 2016.
Okay. For those of you who are listening and not watching, Michael has a full head of hair. Okay. So I don't know where he's losing it. Maybe we need to have like the back cam.
It's getting gray
to see it. So it's gray, but you have this incredible depth of experience from all different facets. And I don't spend a lot of time talking about where you are right now because I share that in the introduction, because I really want to get into, I want to get into the best information. And the fact that you were involved with that College Scorecard, I use it all the time. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Michael, will you describe what the College Scorecard is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say it's two things, depending on where you sit in life. So first of all, it is a government website that basically every piece of college information that you ever see on the World Wide Web, it pulls it from there. It's all the information that colleges provide to the federal government. This could be what kind of students go there, how many students are admitted, what's their SAT scores, what kinds of students, are they staying after the first year, are they graduating? And now how much do they earn after they go to a school or graduate from a specific program? So the thought behind this was we had all this information in the federal government, but it's super clunky and it's all over the place. And if you're a consumer, which all of us are, especially when we think about colleges, where am I going to go? You kind of needed, or the thought process was, we want to have some sort of resource to where it's pretty easy for people to figure out where they can get the best bang for their educational buck. So we've been working on that for a while. It was, like I said, super elementary version, released in 2013. There were 4 data points, and there was a box that said employment outcomes to come later. This has grown significantly from 2015 in the Obama administration, through the Trump administration, through the Biden administration, now through the Trump administration. So it's one of these things that has sat around and stayed around and improved because there's such a need for transparency, for outcomes, and for the work that you all do, Harlan.
Yeah, it's great. So if any of you are unfamiliar, go to collegescorecard.ed.gov, and I have it up on another screen here. Michael, I want to just kind of give you and everybody else an overview of what's most important to me today. And one of the things is, and this is kind of a selfish conversation, I am working on a book. It's about helping students to go from college to career. So I have the high school to college with The Naked Roommate and 107 other issues you might run into in college. And then my book, Win or Learn, is all about grit and resiliency and being great at rejection, which I'm sure, you have to be great at rejection doing what you've done over the years. How are you with rejection, Michael?
Great. I fail all the time. And I'm sort of employable now because of all the mistakes that I've made and that I've learned from. Yeah. I wrote a silly personal blog the other day, which are my favorite things to write. But it's about something I learned while I was on the soccer field with my 10-year-old. And he has a newfound interest in soccer, as they do every 3 months.
Yeah.
So we're out playing on the field, and he's just kind of getting into it, and he's kicking goals against a random kid. And he keeps going and he keeps going. And like the third or fourth shot, he's like, "I'm sorry, I suck." And the kid goes, "You don't suck. You're learning." And that was amazing. That's a 10-year-old. And I was like, ding, ding, ding. Like, how many times have I sucked at something before I learned it? So none of these things are perfect, but I made so many mistakes that I'm now 42. So people employ me there because I've already made all the mistakes.
Right.
And that's what I want to give everyone else the opportunity to not make the same mistakes that I did. So I love failing because it gives me an opportunity to get better.
Right. And given what you've done over the years and being in a position where you're establishing something from scratch, really trying to figure out how to gather data, the best ways, the most efficient ways, the best practices, in order to create best practices, you have to have bad practices or not best practices. It's like that mindset is crucial because like you were doing that. If you're 42, then you were doing that when you were like in your 30s, early 30s.
Like
Yeah, that's wild. That's a wild position, working with the Obama administration you're a deputy secretary of, what was your position?
Well, a number of them, but I started as a scheduler. So I just want folks to keep that in mind.
Tell me what that is.
I was a confidential assistant, which sounds super secret.
What is that? Yeah.
Fancy. But they said, basically, we want you to come work for the assistant secretary, all these fancy words. Assistant secretary for K through 12 education. She's in charge of all K through 12 education.
Okay.
And I was 26 at the time. I had a master's degree. I worked on the Obama campaign. I've done a bunch of work in education. And they said, before you take this role, we think you might get bored. Like, this is a scheduling role. You're interested in policy stuff. You were in a PhD program. Like, we don't know if you're going to last if you take this. And I basically said, look, I know who this person is. She's a former superintendent in California. She's in charge of all K through 12 education. I'm going to make sure that she has the best briefing books that have ever been made to her so that she knows exactly who she's talking to, what they're going to talk to her about, what she should potentially say in response after I've talked with subject matter experts to get the appropriate response that best represents the interests of her office. Also, if the bathrooms are dirty, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and clean those too. And it's true. I mean, that's what I wanted to do at the time. And it was a way in. And in government, or at least when I was there, it's sort of a meritocracy in a great way that people know the person who can get stuff done. So I became the best confidential assistant to ever exist in the history of confidential assistants. And then I got an opportunity to start working on these other projects and getting stuff done and getting stuff done and getting stuff done. So that's sort of, I think, it's part of the reputation that I was able to build over time.
Right.
And they thought that I was the person to get this done. So I'm happy that they did.
The theme of going from college to career is, really relevant in what you're talking about, because you had that, you said you were in a PhD program?
I'm a PhD dropout.
Okay. That's part of the rejection piece. But for something that obviously aligned with an interest that served you in a way, when you looked at the risk to reward, it was obviously a better choice at the time to pursue this other opportunity. So you were a PhD student and then you got this opportunity. Is that when it came up?
I actually was in a PhD program. These things present themselves in front of you when you never know they're going to.
Yeah.
So as working towards my PhD, you get a master's on the way at University of Florida in sociology. I was interested in race and ethnicity and the intersection between that and education and outcomes. And there was a former senator and governor in Florida who happened to open up a center for civic engagement and civic education. He was a former UF alum. His name is Bob Graham. So there was no one else there. And the chair said, he's sort of interested in education. You're interested in education. Why don't you go work for him? So I did. And this former governor is giving me real pieces of work that I had no business doing. Got me very interested in civic education. Why are people involved in their democracy? How can we make it stronger and more robust? So I changed my thesis to focus on how can we do that in K through 12 education? And I was reading a book on a plane on the way to get my master's going somewhere. And it was by someone who I've never heard of, but he had this interesting story about his troubles in high school, and like he ran with the wrong crowd and he sort of struggled to get where he was at, but now he's in a high level position and he sees opportunities for hope within the country. And his name was Barack Obama. So I decided to follow my passion, get my master's, and join the campaign rather than continue to pursue the PhD. And it just sort of led me to where I was at today.
So when you read something that's compelling, you strike me as the type of person who would reach out to the person, or at least somebody who's close to that person. So, and I want to just help people who are listening, especially if there's a student listening or a recent grad listening. And I think, the world presents itself, the universe offers these connection points. And this ties to the rejection and risk-taking, actually thinking that you are worthy and deserving or capable of being part of certain communities and being curious. And I call it an uninhibited curiosity, which, that your 10-year-old has this uninhibited curiosity until there's a obstacle or shame or judgment. So this idea of having this uninhibited curiosity, and you're on a plane and you read about this person. So then what do you do when you decide to, like, that's a big decision to drop out of your PhD program and then to be in a political campaign or follow someone with no promises?
I study ROI for a living, return on investment.
Yeah.
This is probably not looking like a good return on my investment at the time. But yeah, I looked around and I had this internal thought process of, I can be here in the library researching this for another 3 to 4 years and writing a dissertation and going to be a professor somewhere. But I'm not doing any of the things I'm studying. I'm not involved in my community. I don't really know my neighbors. I'm not volunteering. I'm not doing anything. So I thought that I wanted to be more impactful in practical ways and gain life experience by doing that. So I looked up the campaign website. I applied for something called the fellowship program, which gave me the opportunity to earn $0 for 6 weeks while working 80 hours. And again, this kind of goes through my Department of Education story, as I did that fully and was recognized for doing a good job, was offered a full-time staff position, which paid $2,500 a month, but had health insurance. That equals $30,000 a year for any of the listeners. And they gave me the opportunity to work 115 hours a week. So lucky me. And the campaign ended, we did great where I was located in South Florida. People know you by your reputation and what you do. And I did not have these political ins, how do you get these jobs? I kept contacting people at the Department of Education and saying, hey, I'd still love to work here. I want to know if there's any opportunities to come talk with you and have an informal interview, an informational interview. I did this 4 or 5 times and spent my $200 to get up to DC to go meet these people in person. And I called it being persistent but not annoying. So I was very persistent, on the edge of being annoying. And I finally got a call about 1.5 years later.
And that call was to be a secret assistant.
A secret assistant, a confidential assistant.
Confidential assistant, which is not the position you're probably aspiring for. Is that correct?
I was loving that. I was so
Anything.
happy.
Right.
Yeah, because that's where you start. I mean,
right.
Everyone needs to start somewhere.
Right. But you have this mindset where you have this ability to see the long game. And, the instant gratification isn't really, it doesn't seem to be the driving force. You talk about ROI, and I think so much of ROI is the long game.
That's right. I mean, I think we all have egos, and they're kind of hit a little bit when you're put in something where you think, why am I doing this?
Right.
I got this sort of credential, or look at the person next to me who's doing the higher level work. They're not even that, I could do so much better at it. But again, like as a life lesson, people see the people who are getting things done, no matter what it is. And they're not good. They're let's just go to the academic, academia side of
Sure.
things. There's so many smart people that I work with and that other, in government and education, and they are so good at diagnosing problems. Like they will tell you everything that's wrong or could be better about a certain paper or research project or government project. But it's the people who come up with solutions and say, oh, I'll take care of that. Like that's who you want on your team. People who are figuring out stuff and saying, I will take care of that. So if you do that long enough, people are going to notice and you're going to be on to your next gig before you know it.
So you were the I can take care of it person.
Absolutely.
So problems came up, and as opposed to just layering all the reasons why something is not going to work, you would be an active listener. Then your go-to was, I can be the person to take care of this.
Absolutely. 100%.
Right. And then when it came to this and the scheduling, the confidential assistant, that came after being on the political trail. I'm always fascinated with that. And I know my ADHD sometimes gets in the way, but this is all part of a through line of, how do you go from one place to another, and how do you assess what's the best choice, and what do you do when you're there? And your trajectory is really fascinating, and I find when students are part of political campaigns, or any type of community type of activism, and they're investing. And when you're in your early 20s, if you don't have a ton of debt, if you're able to afford to invest in yourself, that to me is like an incredible time to be able to do the things that you did, really building relationship equity, a strong foundation of how things work in a complicated system. And the stakes are pretty low because you only have something to gain. I would say, would you say that assessment is correct?
I think so. I mean, yeah, I was younger, so I'm able to pick up my bags and leave to Washington, D.C. At the time I had a family, so other folks didn't have a family. They were able to go do the things that I wanted to do quicker. But yeah, I think that it is one thing that I will say, which is not a very ROI thing to say, is I had a passion for this work. I mean, I chose something that I was passionate enough to leave, my college PhD program and say, I want to do this. And if you're interested, or when I was interested, I wanted to do it to the best of my ability. So I'm like, what is community organizing? I have no idea. So I started picking up books and reading about that before getting on the campaign. You said reaching out to people. I reached out to a professor called Marshall Gantz at Harvard, who was in charge of all the organizing stuff that was utilized in the Obama campaign. I was at a conference and I said, can we have coffee? And he said, yes. I mean, that's the other thing that's important to your folks, I think, is we're all afraid to reach out to people, but all you can get is a non-response. And more times than not, people will just say yes.
What conference was it, and why were you there?
It was at a sociology conference. It was my last go around. It was in between when I was on the fellowship and turning on the staff. I said, I got to present this last paper as my last hurrah, which was in Boston.
Okay. Conferences are such a great hack.
Yeah.
Students don't recognize, like when you go to conferences and there are leaders who are presenting and they're on panels, and you're an eager student who is more focused on learning than getting something. And I think this is like, I love listening to your story because it just reflects so many of the key attributes that really help someone to set themselves up for success. And it sounds like you're just doing it naturally, but you were in this place and then you approach this Harvard professor, and explain to me, how did you approach him? What was your strategy?
I think it was an email, and I just said, hey, I'm Michael. I was studying sociology. I'm now in the Obama campaign. I'd love to meet with you. I see you'll be at this conference. Would you have time for a cup of coffee? And we sat down for about an hour. And he said something to me that I remember now, which is you should journal all these things, because I had all these stories about community leaders who never saw themselves as leaders until I gave them the responsibility. And they said, I cannot do that. And I said, well, you're already doing it. And they saw it in themselves. So that was one of the most special things as sort of a mentor or leader during that time, was to show people the abilities that they already had, that they never recognized. And they're amazing. It's just something I carry with me today.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, just a conversation with no expectations.
Can I say that? And the full circle on the Harvard thing is because it's Harvard. But yeah. I was invited to speak there a week or two ago. So it's sort of full circle. It's like, this is weird reaching out to a Harvard professor.
Right.
And now people they're reaching out to me, and that's really neat.
That's exciting. It's not even what the goal was. And the goal is to learn. And I think another takeaway is when you align yourself with people who are doing the things you want to do, who are further along in their career, and you are curious, that really helps you to have this trajectory to end up in the places where the people who are guiding you are sharing their information. I think that it's like, it's not just getting information. It's like, who are the people? Then there's that intimidation factor of who am I to talk to these people? But I'm sure that as you were on the campaign trail, and then as you continued on, you would talk to people, not trying to. Let me ask you this, Michael: the idea that you're talking to people to try to impress them or let them know you know things, versus talking to them from a place of genuinely like wanting to be a sponge. What's the difference?
So you learn that this is building off of what you said about listening. One boss that I had, who was, I just say these because they were super impressive to me, and they still are. Like, she was the superintendent of all schools in Ohio. She was the second boss that came in through K through 12 education. And people reached out to her, all the directors. She wanted to get, meetings with all the directors in the office. And instead of them being invited to her office, which they all wanted to do, they said, I'm coming to your office. She said, no, have me come to their office. And she listened. She did not tell. She listened. And there's advantage to having a sense of being naive, in a sense, and just taking in all of the information. I mean, you gain trust from people. You don't know everything. When you're old enough, like we are, you know nothing. So it's just another opportunity to learn and to take it. And if you're working in a certain spot, it's like, everyone is internally sort of working towards the same goal.
Yeah.
So you might as well learn from them and try to get there together.
How do you reconcile those feelings of being worried about someone judging you versus this real hunger to get information?
I mean, I don't know what folks would really judge folks for. No one, in my opinion, no one ever judges you for reaching out and saying, hey, I would love to hear more about your story. Like, you've probably been on the other end of that. Like, it's flattering, right? Like, why would you want to talk with me? So I hope, just for your listeners, like, there's no judgment in someone trying to learn something. And the way, there are people that are smart in some things. I'm smart in some things and I'm not smart in other things. So right. To be able to learn from folks who are, I only have so much bandwidth. It's like, I can tell you everything about certain areas of life in higher education. But there are other things that I know very little about. So,
right.
Yeah, I mean, it's a curiosity journey, I think, is what you're saying. And it's also a passion journey, which is contagious.
That the idea of passion and ROI not being related, where, there's conversations where, do things you're great at doing and nurture that, focus on that. And I think that if people students, especially teenagers, early 20 somethings, if they actually focused on their passion but aligned it with people who are in places who are living the life they want to live, who have figured out how to turn this thing into something that can support them and be something that's sustainable. And now, given the world we live in and all the different tools that students have access to in terms of AI and information and ways to monetize this, I think this idea of actually acknowledging that passion and then figuring out how to align is a really powerful strategy too. What do you think of that?
100%. Like, my parents are educators, right? There's probably something that was pushing me into this world to begin with. I've been surrounded by it my whole life. And I like working with other people, and the whole teaching process is probably my favorite job. Um, and when you're in the world that I am, which is trying to influence policy to have better student outcomes across the United States, you could give all the data in the world. And if you don't make people feel what you're saying and you're not passionate about what you're saying, they're not going to remember anything. So, I've come from a certain place where I've seen all these statistics. I've seen people thrive. I've seen people get caught up in the system, and smart people, and end up in a completely different spot. So when I'm thinking about, the policies that I'm putting forward, or the papers that I'm writing, or the people that I'm talking to,
Yeah.
it's these individual friends, that have gone in every which direction that I'm tying to my words. So I
Yeah.
think people feel that, they understand that, and they remember it.
Yeah. And your experiences of immersing yourself in community, in uh, these mentorships, it really serves you, because now you have that 10,000-foot perspective, and you can also see. I kind of look at in my head, I'm very visual when I think, and there's all these people you met, and there's all these different lines that have taken them to all these different places, and when you connect the dots, it becomes clear what helps people and what hinders people, and then you get the data to corroborate it. I do something very similar. My Naked Roommate book, Naked Roommate and 107 Other Issues You Might Run Into in College.
I want to hear why you picked 107, not 106 or 108, but another day.
Well, it's because you would ask. That's exactly why, right? Sparks curiosity. There could have been, hundreds. I also have these college tips and life tips, and I think I'm on 1,500 in the college, and 1,100, and there's so many.
Love that.
But that idea of getting data and aligning the data with stories of people who are actually the ones living the life that reflect the data, and bridging that gap, I think is really so powerful. And I love that you have all of this life experience, and you continue to do this. And I want to get to the data, and I want to get to how we can help people who are listening to understand how to approach college search and selection and career development. I want them to understand what they should be thinking about as early as possible, because I have a very strong point of view, and I'll share it with you at some point, but I really want to listen. So going back to the college scorecard, and I love how this is progressing. So much fun. I always have this outline of what I want to do and what I want to talk about, and it's never what happens.
Even better.
It's the best, right? I feel better because I'm like, okay, at least I have a framework, but there's so much discovery. And as we're talking, I'm taking all these notes because these are things I want to make sure that I can include in the book, and also the way the book's being written, the quotes from our conversation. Of course, with your permission, I want to include that, and I want people to be able to scan a QR code or figure out a way where they can actually hear the conversation, to have the context to understand, oh, this is something I wanted to just get out of the way because it's so annoying, because we're in such a polarizing time right now. And, you mentioned your your political affiliation. And for anyone who's like shut down and like, I don't want to listen to this guy, he worked with Obama, can you speak to your objectivity? Or maybe you're not objective, maybe you are very biased, but now where you are right now in terms of HEA, data gathering, consulting, and your political affiliation, can you just get that out of the way?
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you first asked me that, like, I always wonder, this is part of the story, right? It's under the Obama administration this started. Right. I was the former director. So some people might attach a certain perspective to me.
Right.
And the thing that we were doing is not partisan. I mean, which is so attractive, right? It's what, if you're a normal person, or a non-normal person,
right?
You want all the information about where you're getting a good return on your investment. Sometimes when I'm talking about what the best bang for your buck, return on investment, getting good value, that doesn't really sound like a democratic way of approaching an issue necessarily. You might hear students and student outcomes and making sure that every student succeed. They're all the same, like that's the best part about this. And like I said, it's gone through multiple administrations, Republican and Democrat alike. This is an agreeable issue. When I left the Department of Education, I started working for a think tank who was seen as a little left-leaning, but also centrist. And that was intentional because that would allow me to have conversations with people on both sides of the political aisle. And depending on who is in power at a given time, you're going to need to have conversations with
right.
both people wherever they stand politically if you want to get anything done and have real progress, which is in the betterment of students. And it just makes sense. So it depends who I'm talking with at the time and where they stand in life, right? We all have a certain perspective and none of them can be wrong. It's where we've grown to become ourselves.
Yeah.
But if folks are interested in us not wasting taxpayer dollars, I have a bajillion data points that shows that we're sending a bajillion dollars. Okay, that's a lot. But, a lot of money to institutions that may not be good for students. They will be left worse off. Then I have other data points that shows other institutions that aren't your top 10 in the US news, but they're providing the best economic mobility. So they're bringing in a broad group of students, lifting them up and leaving them better off. So it's language that everyone can relate to. I mean, that's another piece of this issue that I love so much is I can engage so many people.
Yeah. So information, data, is not emotional. This is in one of my books I wrote, Information's not emotional. And I had this pushback from my wife and son, and they're like, when you say information's not emotional, it kind of negates the fact that information is emotional. It brings on emotion. And I said, I just want to really speak to that because information is data. Data points are data. Data is a number. It's a thing. It's looking at, MIT is a 97% graduation rate. Just happened to be on my list here. I don't usually start with MIT. We'll start with, American University of Health Sciences or SUNY Downstate Health Sciences University has a 95% graduation rate. So that's the data. And the data triggers emotions. Information brings on emotions. God forbid someone's in an accident. The data is that you have some sort of impact or injury. The emotion is what we feel when acknowledging the data. And one of the things that I really try to do is to put space between the data and the emotion, the information and the emotion, because the more space there is between the information and the emotion, the more room there is to discuss it and analyze it and to be able to learn from it. So, you are an information specialist, a data specialist, and people can attach whatever emotions they want, but the data is the data. And I think that's really important to emphasize because that's, again, a through line because you've gathered so much great data on the scorecard, on the college scorecard. And for those of you who are watching this in like two parts, so Michael Itzkowitz was the developer, the person who was charged with the responsibility of developing the U.S. Department of Education College Scorecard, and is now the founder and leader of HEA, doing consulting and gathering data and information to help people to make the best decisions and to provide the most value for students, educators, communities, and education as a whole. So that's a good overview.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Terrific. So, okay, I want to speak to this idea of looking at colleges through this lens of value and ROI. I get a lot of messages from parents and students, and I wanted to start our conversation off with a particular message, but I didn't. So now I'm starting the second half of our conversation off with this particular message. And this came in yesterday, so it's so timely. And for background, I also want you to know, I listened to or watched, you had a really great, it was a conversation. I think it was maybe from a group from Illinois, but you went through ROI and all the data. It was like 45 minutes. And
that was a while ago, but that was cool.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. I'm going to include that with the show notes, because I think for anyone who is interested in understanding ROI and how data is calculated and how data is interpreted, because what data reveals for one population may not be as relevant for other populations. And there's so much variance in that data. So we're going to do everything we can to make sense of it during this part of the conversation. So this parent writes, I would love a post on, is college still important? As a parent, we can afford USC, but is it worth it? Is our son better off with $400K in college expenses?
Is any son worth better off with $400K? That'd be my first gut as a parent myself.
And this is not a USC. This is not a reflection on USC or any school that's highly selective or has high sticker prices, and most people don't pay the sticker price. So, in fact, tuition has gone down when you look at it through what students are actually paying. So just that context. All right. Sorry to interrupt you. I hate interrupting, but I just
want caveat. Yes.
Right.
We all hear the horror stories, $100,000 at this institution or that institution. That's usually not the case. So let's talk about the first part. Is college still worth it? I say
still important.
Why is it so important?
Yeah.
Great question. Because some people aren't as confident as they used to be. And there's so many reasons for that. But what we will say is that we've seen the confidence or this people questioning, is the value of a college degree worth it? And I think that's what your listener is getting at. And I think the answer is an absolute yes at this point. If I were advising anyone, including my own children, I would say absolutely. And there are so many reasons for that. But, I will look at some data and present some information on the fact, which informs my opinion. And, there was a study that came out through Georgetown Center Education and Workforce, and it shows that whether we think college is worth it or not, 72% of all jobs, which is more than before, will require a post-secondary education by the year 2031. We're in 2025. For anyone listening to this in 2027. So about 6 years away, almost 3/4 of jobs are still going to require some sort of higher education beyond a high school degree.
See, that seems counterintuitive. I hear that. And if I'm listening, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me, that there are going to be more, because there are more opportunities for people to learn outside of a higher ed institution. And I'll look at the study and share it. And I'm not trying to, I'm not challenging. I'm just thinking in terms of someone who's like, that doesn't make any sense, Michael.
A lot of folks might think similarly, right? So we're seeing some data which might be contradicting this fact of like, we don't know if it's as worth it in terms of the credential and the skills that will equip you to enter an open job by the year 2031 or in a few years from now. That all being said, people are also questioning the value, which $100,000 worth it, or is any college worth it?
Right.
And there are so many reasons for this, right? Like tuition itself has gone up. exponentially over the past few decades. Where are you located, Harlan?
I'm in the Chicago area.
Okay, so my parents are, they grew up in Brooklyn and they went to CUNY, City University of
Yeah,
New York. It was like $80. I said a credit the other day. Mom was like, no, it's for a whole semester. And I was like, well, Mom, it costs a lot more now.
right.
And so it's not the same what it used to be. It's more of an investment. That's the part of it, right? So then you get the return part. Are you getting what you pay for? And you're going to spend 2 to 4 years of your life here, if not more. You need to be getting a return based off of the opportunity cost of not being in the workforce, so on and so forth. And colleges we've kind of just given them the blank check in the way of it's saying like, this is absolutely worth it. This is my ticket to economic mobility. It was a given 10 years ago and beyond. Now it's more of a question. So I think it's the time for institutions themselves to step up, and they need to show their value. They need to have real value, but they also need to communicate that effectively because your listeners are asking the right questions. And,
Right.
you know,
How does someone assess that when they're in high school and they're looking at colleges and typically the mindset is success when going through the application process is getting in. And that's really where I would say 90% of the effort and attention is put in getting in, whether it's academics or test scores. It doesn't really focus on the social, emotional, the physical, the financial to a degree, but it starts with that getting in and being the best, so you have the best chance of getting in. So if you are someone who is going through this process and you are focused on the job part, and that's one of the things I'm really focusing on in this next book, what are some things that you would do to investigate colleges? What are some questions you would ask? Where would you start?
yeah, college is sort of a unique buying experience, so to speak, because you only do it once. Like other kinds of goods, we go to like a fast food place, McDonald's. I have kids, way more than I need to. But I know what I'm going to get. I know what I'm going to pay. And I know it's going to be consistent with what I always get. College, we don't know, right? We've never been to college before we go. I think it's critical that students are making a good choice because it's one of the largest financial investments that a student or family will ever make beyond getting a mortgage. I mean, that's just where we're at. So I think in the process, yes, we all want to get in. But I think for a high school student or family nowadays, it's most important to have great options, right? And a lot of options are going to be good. So, think about a television, if I have an LG or a Sony or a Samsung or whatever, they're good. Like you're going to be happy with most of these things. Then there might be one that you get on the side of the street that might be less or might be more, and it's going to break down immediately. You don't want that one. So I think you're right. The first step is getting in, but then it's sort of weighing your options and you're thinking just on a high level, strictly economic, as there's so many other benefits to college, but it's like, how much am I paying versus is this giving me an earnings premium? Am I earning more by going to this institution or majoring in this specific field of study than I would have if I never went in the first place? So, just thinking about that in terms of dollars and cents is a real rational thing for folks to think about.
I think it's really important. And I think that while families focus on getting in as being the most important part, my framework is a transition framework. It's focusing not on search and selection, but it's focusing on what happens once you're there, and then identifying what's going to happen once you leave, using transition as your guide when looking at schools and also looking at outcomes, because those are the most important parts. It's not really about getting in and getting access. It's what is it that's going to actually happen when you're there, and how is that going to impact you, and what value will you get out of that experience? So, you mentioned something. It's funny. You mentioned TVs, and my parents had a TV that's like they had this big screen TV, and they moved, and I took it just because I like TVs, and then I just yesterday took the TV and brought it upstairs because we're not like we're trying to get phones out of our bedroom, my wife and I, and we're so like we're watching more TV, I guess. It's a different screen, but she reads and I'll journal and stuff. But um the other TV that was there was the same TV that we had when my oldest, who's 19, was learning to walk. And he was using that to support himself. And it's a
So
Vizio TV. This is not a paid partnership with Vizio. Um, but it's really funny because it's Vizio TV. It
right,
still works. It's
right,
like I have to get rid of it because I just can't keep collecting TVs. And or I could donate it. TVs are so inexpensive now; it's wild.
right.
But the thing is, the value I've gotten out of this Vizio TV over the past 19 years. I mean, if I were to break down the cost per day, it'd be amazing. And the thing is, there were much more expensive TVs, but I couldn't afford those TVs. And this is the
Yeah.
TV we got. And I
Yep.
think that there is this
So
there.
you didn't take out student loan debt to get another TV.
No, I didn't have
A
to
more
pay off the
expensive TV.
TV. Right. I
Right,
could have been still paying for the TV. I could have
right,
done it on an installment plan
right.
to get this TV, which is really equivalent to what happens when people look at colleges. And there's so much data. I had the chance to talk to Brandon Bustede. I don't know if Brandon and you have, I'm sure, have crossed paths many times. And John Pryor, talked to him as well, because we were talking about the Gallup Purdue Index. It was this idea of what is success and what is important to you and defining success. So in looking at college from someone who has this incredible amount of knowledge and has seen so much data, if you were to define success, not in terms of getting in, but what you can get out and what to look for in a school, forgetting names and rankings, what would your definition of success be?
I think ultimately, in plain terms, college is it leaving you better off? Like, that's what I want to know. If I go to a school, I want to be left better off. And that's a minimum baseline, right? That's a minimum threshold. But buyer beware, there are so many schools, and I do worry about people who don't have all this knowledge that are
Mm-hmm.
going to schools that may not deliver on that promise of leaving you better off.
Okay.
I think that it's like getting into college. You want to have as many opportunities as you can have
Right.
when getting out of college. So it's critical to think about, how do we guesstimate, educated guess in terms of how we will be left better off. We look at previous students and we say,
Right.
what are you providing for them? So that's pretty critical when you're thinking about, am I going to succeed? And it's not what we do typically. I think we're getting there as a society to think a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more in these terms. But, if you say a school has a 33% graduation rate and you're sitting next to one friend and another friend, you're going to look at both of them and you're going to say, well, it ain't going to be me who drops out. Everyone thinks that, myself included. It's just the way that we're programmed. But I think that folks are starting to think about it a little bit more deeply and say, where can I get? I'm going to go one time to a college, usually. Where can I have the best return? And the other thing is just to keep in note, like, most people go close to home. People aren't leaving out of state typically. I know, many of your listeners, we will be thinking about some things out of state. But for the most part, so many students are in community colleges nowadays, 40%, I believe. And I think a heavy majority are going to a school within 50 miles of their house. So just another perspective, like, we'll go where like our friends went or our cousin went. Like, that's our first piece of information. And we're getting to the secondary piece of information, which is this going to provide me good outcomes?
Yeah. You mentioned several times that there are some schools that you just feel are not helping their students. And I would like, if you could on the spot, a checklist that someone should be thinking about in terms of those schools that may not be serving their students and leaving them better off. And what is it that's most important to you so that you can make sure you're better off?
Yeah, so we see some trends that I can talk about, but I do get weary of schools that are very good at advertising. Um, and they may be interested in bringing students in rather than showing them having good outcomes on the back end. So I would say, while I am looking, consumer, I'm only going to buy a deodorant after seeing it 7 times on TV and then at the Super Bowl. I would just say be very careful in terms of how you're making these decisions. What we can see too is that there's good schools in every kind of sector, whether that be public or private, or even some for profit. You can have a bachelor's degree, an associate's degree, or a certificate and be left better off. But we can see, these shorter term credential certificates, they're just disproportionately less likely to leave students better off. Their students are actually earning less than the typical high school graduate at a large proportion of them. So again, that's another thing to ask questions about. We see a lot of publics just being more affordable generally. Schools that are delivering education in the for-profit sector, while some of them provide a good ROI and are good for working adults, they're more flexible. There's just a disproportionate amount that show no economic return whatsoever. So I would say, dig a little bit deeper if you're interested in pursuing those kinds of programs in those kinds of institutions.
Okay. So I was putting together just a little bit of a list while you're talking. So it's the schools that are really advertising. And, I have a high school senior right now, as well as a 19-year-old who's gone through this. One time I actually filled out my dog's name in like a lead gen. There was like,
yes.
And my dog got so much mail.
I love it.
And I kept it because it was fascinating to see all of these schools recruiting my dog. And they all advertise. So if you're looking at that in terms of advertising, how much is too much? Because even the most selective schools, will have pretty extraordinary ads.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see some of these advertisements, and at the end of them, I want to cry. And I want to sign up for the college. Like, I'm ready. Forget my dog. Like, I'm going to whatever online school is being marketed to me. But I would just say, like, that doesn't always mean that it's the best school, but it just means that they're the best in advertising.
Yeah. I think a school, if any school's listening, anybody in marketing and admissions, I think a school that shows students homesick, shows students getting D's and F's, shows students crying, and shows, excuse me, I got all choked up there. So if there's any admissions people or marketing people in college listening, I think a school that can advertise students feeling homesick, crying, getting D's and F's, having roommate issues, dealing with difficult instructors, changing their major, and then finding the people and resources to help support them and emphasizing this and showing snow and rain. And the other side, like, I wonder if there was an experiment, if a school actually showed like what really goes on and was transparent and then emphasized what they're doing to support students from all different backgrounds, from all different demographics, because that's what I get. And I feel like the consumer doesn't know what to ask. So, all right, I'm going to be efficient. I don't know. Do you have a hard stop? Because okay, cool. So I'm going to take advantage of your time. Cool. I love this. I'm so grateful to be able to to be able to go at a pace where we could just really be able to give people good takeaways. Because the goal is, whenever someone listens, like, I don't want to waste people's time. I don't want to waste your time. Like, I want people to leave with something they didn't know when this started. So
and this is fun because I want to explore things that I've never talked about. So you're giving me an opportunity to do that.
Oh, it's great. And if there's things that come up and you're like, man, I'd really like to investigate that more, or I can be a resource in any way. I have this uninhibited curiosity, and I'm mission driven.
Yeah.
And, I'm more frustrated, Michael, than ever before. Really, like I have to not internalize everything because it becomes too much. But we're recording this on October 31st.
Yeah.
It's Halloween. It's scary. The scary reality is that every year I see more students and parents struggling. I see high achieving students who don't know how to deal with problems because they haven't practiced, because they've had to be perfect to get to this next place. I see students, first generation low income students who don't have the resources to be able to take care of themselves. They get so beat up because they're high achievers in high school.
Yep.
And then they get to college and they don't know how to build a support system, and the schools do not have the resources to intervene and support them until it's too late.
Yep.
And there was that one article, it's kind of old now, but it was the Boston, it was either in the Globe or one of the Boston newspapers, where they followed the valedictorians. And they followed the valedictorians and asked them, what was their dream before they graduated. And the majority of these valedictorians, mostly from low income communities, most of them struggled and you had just terrible outcomes.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have the support systems in place. So anyway, I get really upset about that. And, I have solutions. And maybe offline we'll talk, as I've been doing this for over 25 years and I work in kind of a vacuum. I haven't been part of academia. I mean, I'll go and speak at schools and I'll do professional development. I'll work with high schools, and I've talked to hundreds of schools and talked to so many people, and you like to make change. So for me, it's exciting. This podcast helps me to actually talk to people, because telling my wife and Andy, who I work closely with, isn't really going to change the world. So we're on that mission. All right, enough. I'm getting tired of hearing myself talk. I want to give people a checklist. So I have, grad rate. I have employment rate. I have looking at former students, as these are just three things that someone can do.
And I mean, all this data, it makes us fall asleep sometimes. So it's like, am I going to get a degree? Am I going to get a good job? Am I going to be able to pay down my loans? And am I going to be able to get on with my life? Those are the financial things.
Okay.
It's just easy peasy.
Right. Everyone should go through those questions, and they should make sure, what is the graduation rate? What is the employment rate? What about internships? What about research opportunities, experiential learning?
Yes.
Those are critical. And these are questions that so many students and parents don't think to ask. Would you agree that those are critical?
Absolutely. I mean,
Great.
Number one, there's research to back these things up. But yes, just personal experience as well. Having this opportunity at the University of Florida to step into this Center for Civic Engagement changed my life.
You saw these things firsthand, because there's so many people from so many different backgrounds going to UF. Okay, so this is something that has it's made me very curious on this College Scorecard.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm such a geek, because I'm so pumped that I get to actually talk to you about it, because I feel like when people look at the graduation rate on the scorecard, and it's really important when you're on this scorecard, you're going to see these little circles with an eye that explain to you more about the data. And when I click on graduation rate, it says the graduation rate is the share of students who graduated within 8 years. 8 years of entering the school for the first time, which would mean if you're following these rates, then all of a sudden you have to acknowledge there's eight years. How does someone budget for 8 years? Can you explain the graduation rate to me? I don't, and I'm saying I'm being kind of silly, but I don't understand that.
Let's hope no one has to budget for 8 years. But I will say, we know through data that it takes approximately 5.1 years for students to complete a 4-year degree. Okay. It takes approximately 3.3 years to complete an associate's degree. The reason why they chose that 8-year mark at this point, which was beyond my tenure, is that it includes part-time students in it as well.
Okay.
So if you just think about it, we have more part-time students than we did previously. If you are a part-time student at a 4-year institution for the entire time,
Yeah.
it could ostensibly take you 8 years to finish.
So this is data I was looking for because I wanted to get 4-year graduation rates and I want to get 6-year graduation rates. And I know College Board, they've had something it's getting a little bit old, and I'll use that when presenting. Is there a place where families can get a stronger idea of what a 4-year, 5-year, 6-year graduation rate would be?
There's a backup website called the College Navigator through the U.S. Department of Education that does provide this information on every college. It's a little more clunky, which
Right.
is the reason why the scorecard was put together in the first place. But I'm hearing you, and I'm hearing that there may be some need to get 4-year graduation rates in front of people who are applying
Yeah.
to 4-year colleges.
Well, that's the thing. Like, if through HEA or some other,
We don't use that. It's interesting. Like the federal government had a graduation rate, which is the federal graduation rate, which is 150% of the time that is usually expected to graduation. So if it was a 4-year college,
right,
it would measure how many students graduated within 6 years.
right.
What you're saying is, hey guys, like I don't want to be there for 6 years. What's my chance of graduating like on time?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
like when it comes to filtering through the data, there's great tools, and I want to just say how grateful I am for all the data, and I just want to thank you for that. In terms of how, as a parent or a student, do I practically apply this so that there can be transparency? The 8-year graduation rate really doesn't give me much of a compass to be able to budget and understand what I'm looking at. So that would be like, I mean, I would love that. And there's the and then the cost is so tricky because there's such variance. So when it comes to looking at the cost, what is the lens that someone should approach processing the cost numbers?
Yeah, I think the information through what we call net cost, this is something that's presented on the scorecard, is the most reliable source of information we have on how much students and families will actually pay out of pocket.
Okay.
So this is after all grants and scholarships are deducted. That's what I want to know.
Yes.
Like, I don't care if Vanderbilt costs $90,000. So they say, I want to know how much I'm actually going to pay after
Right.
all the money you give me to go to a certain place. So if I'm looking at a 4-year college, I might take that number, the net cost at Vanderbilt, University of Florida, wherever I'm looking at, and I would multiply it by assuming that how long I'm going to be in college, whether that be 4 years or 5 years or
Right.
whatever it may be.
And I think talking to those students who have recently graduated is a really helpful way. See, the fact that someone doesn't have access to that data, I tell students, listen, if you can't reach out to people who have recently graduated or on that campus, then you are not in a position to make that investment.
Yeah.
At a minimum, you should be talking to those people. And I think the students should be doing it, because if a student can't advocate and you're making that investment, then maybe they need to wait a year if possible. So you mentioned Vanderbilt. So just so people can understand, the average annual cost is $19K, and that's for tuition, and it's a net price cost for everything. So 19,000, right? So you hear 90,000 or 100,000, and that could be very intimidating, and especially if there are parents who qualify for Pell Grants, where your families qualify.
100%.
These schools, and we mentioned public and private, I find that, and I know you do a lot on California, and there's some great data that Michael's recently published through HEA on college affordability in the state of California and return on the investment. I shared something about, it was advice like, if you get into a state school, like that's hitting the jackpot. And there are all these people from California who said, it's great, but we got better offers from private schools who were offering tons of merit aid that actually were a better offer than some of the UC schools.
Yep. So it's a good, like, let's just use a real life example. I looked at the ROI for low and moderate income learners across the state of California. But I did this nationally. So I said, where are students getting the best ROI in terms, if their families they're making between $0 and $30,000 a year. These are our most vulnerable students. So I put on all the data. I clicked enter on my keyboard because that's how we do data, I guess. And who popped up at the top of the list? I was genuinely interested. And the best ROI for low and moderate income students or low income students are places like Harvard, Yale, University of Chicago, and Princeton. And I said, oh my God, I just recreated the US News rankings,
Right.
the most exclusive institutions in the United States. And that's true. They offer very generous scholarships. But then there was a number next to them. Number one, they all admit less than 10% of students. And number two, there's none of these students that go there. They all have less than 20% of students that come from these kinds of income brackets. So that really got me thinking in terms of what's the purpose of higher education in general. We all hear about these schools. They're in US News. That's where we all reference. But is it to recognize and reward these schools that have the most resources and only let in the few and the fortunate?
Right.
Or is there another way of investigating other schools that let in a lot of students and then lift them up and don't cost a lot and leave them better off economically? So I started to come up with a way of evaluating that. And I came up with a very interesting, very different list of schools than we typically hear about.
Right. Where can people see those schools?
That's we did it in California recently. It's on the California Mobility Index. But when I did it nationally, it was work that I did that's called the Economic Mobility Index, which is on our website at the HEA Group. But it's super interesting. When I took these two factors into account, schools like Harvard, who were number 4 in terms of ROI for these low and moderate income students, they went from number 4 to number 847 out of 1,320 schools.
Right.
Schools like University of Chicago went from number 8 to number 860. And it was all these other schools, these, Hispanic serving institutions in New York, California, Texas, they were all on the top of the list. HBCUs, they're usually nowhere to be found on rankings. There were 7 of them in the top 100 in terms of the amount of students that they let in from these backgrounds and the ROI that they provided them.
Right. And it's really cool when you break down that ROI, the formula of the costs of attending college versus how long it will take to recover that money once they graduate and are employed. And I like that formula. I think that makes a lot of sense. And speaking of money, okay, so two things I also wanted to help people to understand: the median earnings. So on the scorecard, it's the median earnings, and it's 10 years after someone graduates. Can you just help me to understand and communicate, how do you come up with a number when you have people who are making $30,000 and you have people who are making $500,000 and you have a school that has 300 majors?
Right. So let's
Tricky.
just say there were a lot of discussions on how to best do this. And it's actually 10 years after students have enrolled in the institution. So they may have graduated, they may have not. But it's enrollment. How much are you earning if you went to a college 10 years after you started? And what the number does that you're seeing on the College Scorecard website is it looks at the median student or the person in the middle. So yes, if you just looked at the average of everyone, whatever Bill Gates's cohort was at college would be like
right,
millions of dollars. That's not a proper way of looking at things. So it makes more sense to look at the median or the student in the middle, the typical student, to figure out half students earn more than this, half students earn less.
right.
This is how much the typical student's making at that point in time.
Okay, great. And I think that just gives you that 10,000 foot perspective. And then it's actually talking to those recent grads. It's contacting the career center, seeing if they have data. And I know that when it comes to accountability and outcomes, schools are being pressed to provide more of this data. So I think that as we continue on, families are going to have more access to that in terms of the transparency
And
piece.
what I'll say about this data through the government, which is why I prefer it into some other sources like surveys or talking with students, is its actual tax record data. So they actually match students who have went to a certain institution. Then they're able to look at their tax records 10 years after they've went to said institution. And that's where all the information comes from. So it's usually better than doing something like surveys, although those have their place, and they can be super helpful. I think that we might get a lot of people who are really happy about their education or really upset about it, who are responding to those.
Given the changes in the U.S. Department of Education and data gathering, so I was talking to Jeff Levy, who does a lot of information gathering on Merit Aid, and puts together this wonderful chart, and I'll make sure to include that in the show notes as well. He was saying, given some of the changes in terms of data reporting and within the Department of Ed, is there anything that needs to be noted right now about that?
I think for institutions themselves, it's business as usual. I do have some internal concerns that there are a tremendous amount of staff reductions that have been put in place. So I am keeping an eye on things from where I sit in life and hopeful and talking to folks who also care about these issues to make sure that these data continue. We can't make good decisions without them. So it's something critically important, and I would encourage folks to think about that and do the same if they have some insight.
Right, because whoever was in charge of keeping this data current and making sure that this reflects the most recent information, there's whether or not that person's still there, we don't really know. But I think also using this as a starting point, and then also going to the schools, because I think this really gives families a framework of some things that they can ask in terms of that financial piece. All right, here's another situation that I really want you to help me with.
Yep.
So I was having a conversation with someone, and they were telling me that their significant other was in a different state. They graduated from a school. They were far away from each other. The significant other graduated in 4 years, and they got a job, and the amount of debt they left with, over $100,000 of debt and a monthly payment of over $2,000, put them in a situation where they were not able to afford to have their own place and to relocate, and they had to go back to live with their family until they could refinance their loans to then provide a little room for savings. But this is a student who did everything right and was at an institution where every year the institution was giving them an education and taking their money, with an understanding by the time we get to year 2, if you're going to graduate with a job and a major, if you have a major that's going to lead to a job that's going to make you, let's say, $50,000, and you are at a point where you have $60,000 in loans, and if you progress 2 more years, you're going to leave with $120,000 in loans, and you're going to be graduating with a degree. It's going to get you a job. It's going to be about $50,000. How, and this happens everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, these are stories that I hear often, and they can come from people very close to me. These are people that are smart. These are people that are educated, and they get into these situations to where it's not what they expected. I think that's what we're saying here.
It's not what they expected, and it's also that the schools, in terms of counseling students and checking in with them and their families,
right?
And I call it a financial fitness test of just seeing where are you year to year, and is your major going to require a graduate degree? So you'd have to budget for that. So really helping families who don't have much financial literacy understand that, providing that, and if the schools don't provide it, then I have a solution because I'm solution oriented. I'm kind of angling towards a solution, but I just wanted to, understand, because that's a real issue that so many families deal with. And it doesn't seem like there's a lot of emphasis on that aspect of the school's responsibility or partnership when it comes to students' investments.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I'm talking about before you go, and then you're saying, well, after you owe.
Every
Um,
year, right? Every year,
yeah.
it is so crystal clear. If a student has a balance, I've talked to, oh my gosh, there was this one student who came up to me, and it was like after their first year, and they come from a wonderful family, and the father was, you need to go to college, and they had $70,000 in loans after 1 year, and they weren't even sure what their career path was going to be.
I mean, when I was like showing concern about some institutions, like this is the specific student that I'm talking about. Like, and there's hundreds of thousands of them. And
Right.
you spoke to this one person, and you could probably see the fear and the pain in their eyes. And those are tough decisions when you're already invested in something, you're already there. Some
Right.
institute, you might say, well, maybe I should consider transferring to another institution. And then you would need to figure out how many credits will actually transfer. And sometimes they don't all transfer, depending on the institution you went to
Right.
in the first place. But yes, to your point, like a yearly check-in to think about how much more will I be paying out of pocket? How much more debt will I need to finance? These are all critical issues, and
Yep.
they've sort of ballooned in the past, which is why
Right.
we're having questions about confidence in the value of a college degree today.
Right. Well, I I created something called a college and career future math calculator,
Yeah.
and I'll share it with you after this, and I'd love to get your feedback. And the goal is, what if every year, before a student even accepted an offer, applied to college, what if every year a student did a financial fitness test with their families, and the financial fitness test was pretty simple. It said, what is your cost of attendance? How much of your cost of attendance are you financing through loans? And then the other crucial part is, let's estimate how much you'll earn when you graduate.
Oh, wow.
So this idea of future math. So, and then the way the calculator works is, I use the 50-30-20 rule. And I know the 50-30-20 rule, in terms of budgeting, 50% for needs, 30% for wants, and 20% for savings and debt repayment. And people can have different opinions on what they think the best strategy is, and that's absolutely fine. But this is the easiest way to communicate this. So if you're looking at a job that's going to pay you $50,000, well, 20% of that after taxes is maybe $800, something like that. And if 800 is your cap on what you can spend per month in terms of debt repayment, then it's going to be pretty clear when you are getting to a point where you have maxed out what you realistically can budget and pay for, assuming you get a job out of college. So it's pretty simple. And then this financial fitness piece, and maybe, if you're interested in this, I don't even know if the schools would be as interested in this, because it's almost like too much transparency.
100%. Like that's
Right.
the issue is, yeah, schools aren't jumping on board to show all this information, which again is sort of a lost opportunity if you're providing good outcomes. And I'm like, you're saying this from a family perspective, and I'm thinking about it from a policy, like what can we do policy solutions wise
Yeah.
to get this information in front of folks. There was a project when I first stepped into the Office of Postsecondary Education, which was the College Scorecard was one of them. And there was this other thing called the Financial Aid Shopping Sheet. And it was pretty similar to what you're saying, which it was supposed to be a one-page document that outlined most of the issues. How much exactly am I paying? How many grants and scholarships am I getting? What are my out-of-pocket costs after room and board? Here's my final bill. An estimate of what it would be for the whole year. Earnings was not there, but could or should be. I think it may have been added by the end. But there's no requirement. So we
Right.
were strongly we were sending strong worded letters to institutions to ask them to consider adopting this for their
Right.
students. I think 500 or 700 may have at the time, but it sort of stalled. But yes, I mean, just as people, we need to be hit over the head with this information so many times for it to stick.
Yeah. I mean, it's very basic information. And I think that if schools said, hey, we want to do this and we want to make sure you have a financial fitness test. So if you're a sophomore and you are now at a point where your projected revenue, if you get a job when you graduate, isn't going to enable you to have an independent life, then what are some things that we can do? And I think that like that part of the transparency, I think we're going to see this. I think we're going to see this because I think consumers are going to demand it.
Yeah.
And schools that acknowledge this and say, we understand authenticity and full transparency is something that is incredibly important, because I think people want to be able to trust their schools and their leaders. So, my role is kind of like, and listen, I'm a friend to everyone. I don't have a problem. I just want people to get information. And now we're living in a world where information is going to be more accessible than ever before. It's kind of like this, Michael, it's so funny. So I was at a store on vacation, and it was a store that said no cameras. It was
Right.
like a boutique for like teens, and we were just walking around, and it said no pictures, because what happened is someone took a picture of one of their products and then somebody copied it, and they were so worried about someone stealing their information, stealing their stuff. And I was
Right.
like, if I really wanted to take pictures, I'd put on some Meta glasses. I would get a pen that has a camera.
100%.
It's like we live in a world where it is going to become impossible to hide what people are seeing and experiencing. We're seeing that.
Right.
So the idea of radical transparency,
Right.
and now as consumers, and I think people who are on the outside, the problems that we're trying to solve, there are more tools that enable more people to be able to provide the resources. Even like I built this app,
Yeah.
and I've gotten feedback from a bunch of different people who are in my trusted circle, and I would absolutely love your feedback, and figure out, if it's something that's you're not able to do because of the different relationships, which I'm not even asking you to do anything.
Yeah.
It's just this idea of like, wow, what if we lived in a world where students and parents could actually understand how much it's going to cost, and maybe they have to wait till they get in. That's fine. When they
Right.
get their offers, and then once they have their offers, to understand how much it's going to cost each year, and if
Right.
they need to finance it, how they can budget for this, and to be able to be in a position of strength when they graduate. And that's it.
100%. Yeah. I mean, this seems like common sense. And we have all this data on, you have more data on buying a washing machine, and we shouldn't. We
Right.
all have our consumer reports. It's like we should definitely have full transparency when it comes to what we're getting and what we're looking for.
Right. It's a tricky thing because it's tough for the schools because, just the model is breaking down
Right.
as we approach the this demographic cliff.
Right.
And how many students are they going to be losing in the next 10 years, roughly? Do you have that offhand?
I don't, but it will be less and less that can even apply. We're just got to have less students.
Right. So it's coming. So, I see my role as being able to help people to make those decisions, but then also set them up for success when it comes to that career piece. So getting back on track, there was another stat that you shared during that presentation, and you were talking about the importance. I think it was part of a Q&A, is a graduate starting salary, how that correlates to potential earnings.
Yeah.
Is that information you have offhand?
How it graduates to potential earnings. I mean, I think the one thing that I was looking at was, I call it an earnings premium. And it's essentially, are you making more than someone who never went to college? So a high school graduate who maybe in the state of California, they're aged between 25 and 34 years old. Are you making more than them? And how much more are you making than them? That's sort of your earnings premium, just to ensure that you're earning more than if you never went to college in the first place.
Right. And then I thought there was something with the relationship of like, if you have a starting salary that's at a certain level, to increase that over the span of your career becomes more difficult the lower the starting salary. Am I making that up?
That was actually something through another organization. But yeah, it just shows how critical your first job is, essentially.
Right.
It sort of sets the benchmark of where you're going. Something that's come up repeatedly for me is they're like, well, Michael, you look at salary data. Like, you must not like the liberal arts and or theater. You're not cultured. And I'm like, wait a second. I'm a sociology major here. You're barking up the wrong tree. And something interesting with liberal arts majors, because this is a concern that comes up, is that we notice that they're doing okay when it comes to finances generally. Yeah. So I think there's a little criticism or worry that's unfounded. These are interesting majors nowadays too, in the age of artificial intelligence. No buzzword, but here we are. Yeah. But like, we need to know people that are going to be able to ask the right questions. Right. And that's critical. Historically, when it comes to more conceptual majors such as liberal arts, we've also seen that their salary trajectories, they may start off lower, but they pick up steam around year 5. So it's going to take them a bit to get settled and to figure out where they are, in terms of employability and just getting compensated as such.
Yeah. And those stats, because I've seen those stats, because someone said to me in response to a video of grades are not that important for the majority of employers. And they were saying, they are important and you want to get that starting salary. And there's certain majors that provide that stronger starting point. And the answer is yes, if you look at it in the short term, but when you look at it in the long term, and I think this is what one of the big headlines of the book is that the ability to be curious and learn and be adaptable and to have a flexible definition of success that's based less on outcome and more on experience and learning and curiosity is going to put you at an advantage that is going to provide a greater ROI for life in a time where careers are rapidly changing, and the ability to learn and adapt as opposed to living in a binary world where there are certain outcomes that correlate to success. Those jobs, those experiences, they're changing so rapidly. So the data that we have in the past, even the data of like, I know you didn't do the data of like starting salary. Again, I was talking to my wife about this because I was really excited about our conversation. We live in a time where you could have a job and then you could have 3 or 4 other sources of income, based on creating something or selling something or having your hobby be a revenue stream. And also how people are making money is changing so rapidly. So I think that as one of the takeaways I hope people leave with.
Yeah, I mean, it's just when I think about ideal, if I was to kind of create one ideal college, I would think about, students that come in, like, you don't want to ask them what they want to major in, or maybe how much they want to make, or what do you want to be when you get older? It's more so like, what problem do you want to solve? And how can I equip you with the skills to get where you want to be? And I think to your point, like, it's not, we know computer science majors are going to be fine financially, the verdict's out. But in terms of this changing economy and artificial intelligence and way of going about business, it's more of the question of, are you equipped with the right skills to help my company succeed? And it may be different today, in 5 years from today, as it is today, but do you have the right skill set to at least advance us in the direction that we want to go?
hey, how much are you using AI in terms of data gathering and just, helping with the process or processes is
Me,
a word,
0%.
processes. You're not using any AI to help like even aggregate data?
Maybe I'm old school. But yeah, I've been
That's
doing it for a while. So I don't see the need as of
right. Right.
I also want to anything that we put out, we need to be valid and be presented with fidelity. So I'm not saying this can't be done by any means, but there's just a trustworthy process that we've gone through and our quality checks.
Yeah.
So
Well, there's another conversation we can have offline about that, but there's, for me, because right now I'm in a big data gathering time because I get stories from students and I have been really working hard to be as proficient as I can on learning things that make me uncomfortable in terms of AI, of like even like building an app and having it be a way to solve a problem, and even in terms of like data gathering. Uh, People are sharing, it's their thoughts. I'm not uh, messing with that aspect. It's once I get the data in a bucket, how can I then take that data and use AI to be able to share a narrative based on patterns
yeah,
in terms. So like that part for me, it's been like rocket fuel.
yeah.
I don't know if that, do you feel like that would be, would you judge that in any way of being,
No, I mean, I can only speak from personal experience, and
yeah,
the one thing that I'm seeing is that it's a great like first run at something. It's like do this things based off of these
right.
parameters that I'm providing you. And I don't know if you've seen this either, but then I think a necessary second step for me before I say something to someone else about what this thing produced for me is like I need to look at the sources. So it's kind of like this information
Yeah.
gathering thing. It's
Yeah.
there's news everywhere. Like what's the real thing?
Yeah.
How can I verify this? So I don't fully rely on it to give me all of the right information that I need.
Absolutely.
But it's an amazing first step. And I think that that's the next step too, is it's teaching students how to use this in a way to where we can get
Right.
objectively correct information.
Absolutely. That is so important. And anything that I share, I will ask AI to tell me the source, give me the source, show me the link, show me the journal, show
Yeah.
me the research, and then verify that that research is valid and trustworthy. It just is a way to get access to that data. If somebody, this is such a great conversation for someone who is like, let's say you're like 19 or 20, you're in college, and you are someone who is so focused on factual, reliable information, and you are able to use AI tools to be able to do the things that Michael just talked about. And if that person were to come to you and that person was interested in what you're doing and say, I took your data and I created these different graphs or outcomes or patterns, and I used some AI tools and I wanted to show you because I think you have so much rich data, and I would love to just be able to work a couple days a week to be able to just take all this information and be able to process in different ways. Would you be interested in that? I'm not.
Yes. I mean, so essentially, like I'm just trying to think of other people that I've worked with in the past and call me, I'm not a micromanager, but I'm a little OCD like you. Or you said ADHD, you.
I'm a little bit. I'm a little bit of everything.
So I always check it. I'll always go through the data and rerun it just to make sure that I'm seeing the same things that they're seeing in the same way.
Yeah.
I put in AI data just to mess around with it, my stuff or other people's
Yeah.
stuff. And it's been incorrect sometimes,
Yeah.
so, but there's people like you're saying that probably know why it will be incorrect and know how to make sure that it's correct.
Yeah.
So I'm totally open to that idea. I mean, just for an example, I'm working or was approached by University of Maryland, and they want to have some students who are basically studying to be consultants that are looking for real life projects, and they're wondering if the HEA Group might be a good spot to have them advise me and take on a few projects. And there's students that might be interested in graphic visualization,
Yeah.
data analysis, which we'll see if that's something that they might do. But also just other business things in terms of like outreach, getting things in the right hands. So it'll be super interesting to see where these younger people than me guide me, but I'm really looking forward to it.
I love it. I think that high school students, college students who have knowledge of how to take information and share it in different ways or in ways that is more accessible, like even those students coming in and taking the data and using Sora to create short videos that demonstrate something that is important and compelling that isn't really like, you're like, this is data, no one's really interested in this, but to do it in a way where it's short and concise and factual and creates, multiple delivery mechanisms to be able to do that. So even like taking stuff and then finding other ways, I just feel like my head is just exploding in terms of like all the different ways, because being mission oriented, I'm going to wrap up in a sec because I know we've gone much longer than you probably allocated, but the potential of being able to serve and to be able to communicate information in different ways. There have never been more ways to be able to do that. There is so much clutter, but it's like, man.
So it's just really interesting. So I also believe, I think like you, is you learn it now, or else you're going to get left behind. These things, it's exponentially increasing its capacity every 6 months. So people like you and myself need to understand what its capabilities are at the given moment. And I mean, I would throw stuff into it to create a presentation for me that I would give to other people.
Right.
As an example, and you could write fun stuff. It's like, pretend you're a top 5 consulting company at McKinsey and create these things for me in this way. And it gives me something, but it's not what I'm always looking for.
No.
So that's the other part of the critical thinking piece is like, it's knowing how to organize that information, because you're going to be the ones communicating it to people. Like we're not going anywhere. I know there's an AI robot that might do chores for me in my house that I can purchase for $20,000.
Right.
I get it, and I'm interested, but I think there's still value in being able to figuring out how to organize and communicate information effectively.
Oh, I think that's so key. And and for anyone listening, please don't misunderstand that. I don't think it should replace anything. The critical thinking piece is so important, and how to not lose that, and how to use AI in a way that it actually gives you more data that's reliable, to think more critically, and to find more ways to be able to share that in the most efficient ways. I think is so powerful. So and I'm excited. I'm going to share that calculator. I'm going to share the College and Future Math calculator, because there are so many variables to it, and you are someone who understands how to look at variables to get the best outcome, or at least one that's going to provide the greatest reliability and impact. So I'll do that. And that's and making sure and you're someone who just like, you want to make sure it's right. And everybody needs to have someone in their corner who is going to ask them those questions so that they can do their best work. So Michael, this has been so fantastic. I'm just so grateful for your time. I want to ask you 2 last questions. If there's something that you would want to communicate to a student or a parent who is going through this college planning process, or who is in college and really wants to be set up to have a great career, what would be the most important thing they could do?
If you're thinking about a great career, I think where you go and what you study are going to make a tremendous difference. And oftentimes what you major in specifically. So yes, some of us want brand name colleges and we don't even know why we want them. We've just been told that. But there are so many good opportunities, and a lot of these are public state institutions. Maybe I'm biased as I went to one, but I've seen so many people that have just had tremendous careers after going into a local state university, paying a reasonable cost, and majoring in something that they're really passionate about.
It's great. And it gives you access to so many people from so many different backgrounds, having so many different life experiences that you really benefit, I think, in so many different ways. Okay. Now, in terms of HEA and what you're most focused on, what problem you're trying to solve or problems, I would love to wrap with what you're working on, what excites you, so other people can jump on the site, learn from you.
Yeah, so you said there's a lot of things going on in the world right now. I've tried to been focused on opportunities that still exist, and that keeps me going every single day. So I've seen a lot of college leaders that are running into the data instead of running away from it over the past few years. So I'm very interested in turning up the heat and working with institutions and states leaders and philanthropies or whoever wants to be a part of this to help institutions use this for continuous improvement efforts in terms of outcomes, but also thinking about what they're offering in terms of programs and making sure there's a match between the jobs that are offered tomorrow relative to what we think we're preparing students for today. So I think that there's just a huge opportunity there to rethink how we've done things in the past. It's not about bringing students in anymore. It's about what happens after they leave. So that's sort of where we're going. And that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah. Outcomes, how to measure outcomes and be a partner with schools and work together. I think that's also what I want to do. And
Yeah.
I'm thrilled to have the chance to meet you and to continue to get to know you. Thank you for being so generous with your time.
Of course.
I hope
This was awesome.
Yeah, this is, man, I could talk to you for hours. So we've already talked for hours, or at least almost 2 hours. Okay. So for those of you who want to get more information on Michael and HEA, where can they go? What's the best way to stay connected with you?
Generally, if you Google HEA Group, we're the HEAgroup.com. So please come check us out. A bunch of resources for anyone interested, since we've kind of been talking about data. Something that we do that is a differentiator with our organization is that we publish every piece of data in every report that we write. This is not just an analysis. This is for you. This is for leaders. This is for families. Easily downloadable. Have at it. Know all the outcomes, institutions, college programs. Hope it's helpful.
Wonderful. And if there's any data that you want me to include in this book, if relevant to that high school to college, college to career, please let me know, because I will include that. And I'm going to make sure that there are links available, and maybe we'll even do something. I mean, books take a long time to come out. That's why I want to get this out as soon as possible. So the writing of the book is happening, and maybe we can do a part 2 and to see, what we were talking about and where things are in the future. So thanks again. I'm going to call you Mike at the end. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. You're fantastic. And this is a great new relationship. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks a lot.